We are hopeless, selfish creatures, and we need a savior.
She was a total heathen.
All right, we're doing a podcast.
Hi, we're your two NoMos. I'm Kate.
And I'm Erika.
And welcome to another episode of an ExMo.
And an NeverMo
Walk into a bar.
We are here at The Break. That's where we shoot all of our episodes currently. And we love it here. They have great food, great drink. Come by. It's right in the middle of Daybreak in Utah. And we love it lots. Mm-hmm. Today, our episode is called A Very Special Two NoMos. It's a kind of an after-school special type of episode. The more you know. It's going to be a little bit maybe less lighthearted than some of our other episodes. We're just going to dive into some stuff that's been going on, especially for Kate as an ExMo, as we have launched this podcast.
Yes, indeed.
So let's, I think, start with maybe what our journey has been so far, and then what's kind of happened recently.
Right, we've only been at this for a little over a month,
which is crazy because it feels like 6 years.
Yes, it does. And so we had this seed of an idea that we wanted to start this podcast together, and we feel like, and so far it's been received really well. When it was released, we've got a lot of really positive feedback because we feel like this is going to be helping a lot of people feel validated and seen. And we've had a chance to meet some people. In fact, we met someone at the bar today before we started our episode who said, "We just heard your episode last night." And it's an opportunity to start talking and sharing experiences, which we love. They're like, well, here's my experience being a member of the church or being a former member or a never member. It's so great to build this community, and we really love that.
Yeah, and it's, and totally fantastic. And one woman, I'll just say, she was, she said that she'd grown up in the 60s. She was a teenager in the 60s, and instantly she wanted to share her story with us. We should probably have her on the show at some point. But she said, when I was 16, I was in the church, and the bishop called me into his office, and he had me kneel on the floor to measure my skirt. And we were like, oh, geez. And she was like, yeah, you know what I said to him?
Fuck you.
We were like, that's awesome, which is so great that people are sharing stories with us. And when we posted on Facebook to a couple of different places, so many people just said so many positive things. Thank you for your voices. Thank you for letting us share our voices, for telling these stories, which is really nice and makes us really happy. That is so much a part of why we're doing this. And I think over the last month that we've been planning, we've had so many conversations, and we've sat down together in each other's living rooms over glasses of wine, over cups of coffee, and just talked through everything that we want to be discussing in the episodes and what each of the episodes would entail and just how we were going to move forward. And as we got closer and closer, and especially after we shot our first episode, I was so excited to see kind of what was happening to us, when we weren't with cameras in front of us, to see that did happen when we were actually shooting something, and see that product, and that it was working, and we had the same rapport that we did when we were alone. And so as we were approaching our launch date, which was this last Tuesday, I was getting so excited. And that's sort of my personality. I get really excited about things, but then I noticed something different was happening for Kate. There was a divergence.
Absolutely. It was as exciting as it was, because it is, to be involved in a project like this with so many great people that are helping us with this journey.
Can we talk about that really, really quick, too?
Of course.
We have had so many people just believe in this project and help us. Colin is over here. He's our DP camera person, done a phenomenal job. So amazing.
We had someone volunteer their photography skills and time because they believe in this project.
She needs to stay anonymous by necessity, but she did a really great job, and we're super happy for that.
We also had someone do our intro and outro.
Yeah, Chris Kovics is amazing, does really great music, and just leapt in. I was like, hey, we're doing this thing. He was like, yes, I want to help you, which was amazing. And then
my ex-husband, Bob, has been remarkable for helping us in this. And so we're so deeply grateful for everyone who's helping with this, and the good people here at The Break, which have been wonderful. So as exciting as all of this is, it's wonderful to have all of these people behind us. I had this overwhelming feeling of dread. And I couldn't figure out why, although I had a kind of an idea of what it was, is I still have friends and family who are members of the church. I still have a lot of people in my life who are members of the Mormon Church, and I knew that this content would be hurtful to them. I have a couple of dear friends who are still active members of the church that I converse with almost daily, and I had been avoiding conversations with them for a while because I didn't want to bring this up until last week, right after we had filmed our episodes. It was weighing on me, and I reached out to them and I said, girls, we need to talk about this. This is the direction I'm going in my life. And they responded saying, Kate, we don't know who you are anymore. When we see these things, it's hurtful, because when you criticize the church, you're criticizing us, because we are members of the church and the church is a whole. And it just hit me so hard, and it hurt to hear this. And I understood what it was like, because I felt that way too. Once upon a time, I believed this, that when someone was critical of the church, they were critical of me, because those were my beliefs and I was being attacked.
Right, and that is by design. That is, again, it's a cult tactic, it's an abuser tactic, it's a manipulative tactic to sort of fuse the people with the organization. So when there is any criticism, any bad talk, any condemnation, any just even like looking at the organization, shining a light on some of the practices, that is construed by the members as an attack on themselves, because they see themselves as an extension of the church. They're not just a part of the church. The church is a part of them. And I couldn't understand what was happening, because I've never been a member of the church. I know some people who are a part of the church, but I'm not super close friends with them. I definitely don't want to hurt anybody. That's certainly not my intention. But, you know, as we've been talking about this, we've been talking about how many people have had the same experiences as you. How many people have been traumatized by the church? How many people have been told that they're worthless, that they need the church to live wholesome, real, true lives, to be righteous? So it was really, that was part of our mission, and I was getting excited about that, about being able to talk about this in sort of a public forum, especially with my experience of having worked in an organization deeply entrenched in the church, and then, you know, talking with you about all of your experiences. So when we started to meet up, and we were talking about our launch strategy, and we're like, yay. Kate was like, I don't know. And I was like, what is going on for you? Like, this is so, and she hadn't talked to me or opened up about it at first.
Because I wasn't really aware of what was going on. But it was this conversation with these two friends that really helped. So when I reached out to them and I said, I can't afford to lose you. I can't afford to lose you two as my friends, because they have been my rocks for this last year and a half. When I started going through this midlife unraveling, they were there for me. They were the ones to say, hey, we've got you. And they weren't overly critical either. As I was exploring my newfound freedom, they weren't the ones to say, why are you drinking, Kate? You shouldn't be doing that. They were celebrating my freedom and my ability to explore who I was. But I couldn't afford to lose them. So I said, let's have a conversation. And as painful as this is I'm going to have to invite you or uninvite you from following me on my social media. I don't want you to follow me on TikTok anymore. I don't want you to do these things. And I hope that doesn't ruin our relationship. And both of them came back and they said, that sounds like a perfect resolution to this issue that we have.
But before that, there was a moment where it looked like there might be a rift, which I think was when there was like a super dive for you, and that was when I was having a little bit even more. And I think I said to you, why don't they just disengage from your content? And one of the things that came up for me was this same sort of dynamic that seemed to me at the time like they were saying, we need you to change. You are not a member of the church anymore. Mm-hmm. You think that the church is a harmful, horrible organization that is traumatizing people and causing really bad things to happen for people. But you never looked at your friends and said, you know what, I've left the church. I need you to leave the church. I need you to disengage from it because it makes me uncomfortable. And that's where like the squickiness came from me, because in the moment before they were like, okay, great, we'll just disengage from your content, they seemed to me to be almost asking you to change. They were telling you that you were making them uncomfortable by the choices you were making and the things that you were saying. And it did resolve, which is great. But in the middle of that,
it was messy.
Yeah, it was
really,
messy.
really messy. And I sobbed. I cried and cried. I remember sending you a Marco Polo. Just, I don't know what to do. I can't afford to lose these friends. It was really, really hard and messy for a while. But the conversation, we talked about it. We didn't just sweep it under the rug and pretend that it didn't exist like I'm used to. Growing up, if we had an issue, you turn it off, like we've sung before. You ignore those things, you sweep it under the rug, but when you address this issue with love, with empathy, and I said, I understand this is hard for you girls. I need you to understand that this is what I want to do. I feel like I need to do right now to help me with my healing process. And if you can't be a part of that, then I invite you to not follow me anymore.
And I was just shocked through all of it because I hadn't seen any of that from you. We would get together and just talk about our crazy experiences and your deconstruction and what my experiences were living here as an ever Mormon. So when I saw you kind of go off this cliff, I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help. I didn't know. I was just so surprised to see that, and I'm glad I know it's going to be a journey, and it is always a journey for you, which I think is like part of. It's an interesting journey for me too. I've known you for about a year now, and I've only seen you. I've seen you down a couple times, and I've only seen you like, yes, this is my new life. I'm taking it by the horns. I'm doing this, and in the moment where like we were sort of like crescendoing, about to be able to launch, and this thing that is happening that we've worked toward, all of a sudden I saw kind of, I guess, like the church in action, which is maybe why it was so jarring for me, which I'm sort of just realizing right now, is that it was so jarring to see, yes, this is exactly how it is supposed to work. This is how the church functions. This is how the church keeps its members, by kind of deploying everyone to be its minions, or to do its bidding, basically, and go into an attack mode. When someone says something bad about the church, you cut them out. You are very uncomfortable.
The knee-jerk reaction is to protect the church.
Right.
The
At all costs.
knee-jerk
At all costs.
reaction. Anytime, and I've done a TikTok channel where oftentimes I'll say, hey, here is logic applied to this issue. Here's how I'm doing some critical thinking about the practices of the church. And immediately, members will come on and say, well, you need to read your scriptures more, or you need to pray. I know God lives. God still loves you. God's not giving up on you.
And whatever you do. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And zero empathy. No desire to understand where I'm coming from, how I'm feeling. It's just, let's fix the problem. Let's make sure that we give you the prescription, which is to just submit yourself more to this organization. And then all your problems are going to go away. Though they're not, because it's a lifelong journey. There's no empathy. So as a former school, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say, there was, as you were talking, I remembered one of the things that you said to me, and you were just talking about, whatever you do, at all costs, protect the church. At all costs, you protect the church, above everything, above your own children. And you told me about the tithing story, or like when the church's sort of mantra is, if you need to choose between feeding your children, and we talked about tithing in another episode, but just to remind people, tithing is you give 10% of your income to the church, no matter what. It doesn't matter if you're dirt poor. You give 10% of your meager income to this billion-dollar organization. Look how happy I am about that.
It's an act of faith, just so you know. Those people who give their income will be rewarded in other ways.
Sure. But if you need to choose, and the church tells you, if you have to choose between feeding your children or tithing to this billion-dollar organization, you tithe. That's what you do. And that's the same thing that was happening here. Your friends they were at odds, but protect itself at all costs.
Right.
Even the cost of your children.
I want to go back to talking about empathy, though. I don't think that empathy was ever taught in the church. They have compassion. they have what's called compassion. We have an organization called the Relief Society. It's for all of the women in the church that get together to show compassionate service to others. So they show compassion if there's a sickness, or if there's a death, or if there's a job loss, or some major disaster to a family. They will rush in, like, let's make your meals, let's help clean your house, let's see what we can do to help you. That's compassion. I don't think they ever understand empathy, because the compassion ends when, you've got a child who is LGBT, or you've got someone in your family who's struggling with addiction. You've got big, major challenges that the church would label these people as black sheep or sinners. That's where the compassion ends.
And if you leave, if you are someone who has left
Absolutely.
the church, you have compassion in this little tiny box. And if you fit in that box, you get compassion. Congratulations. But if you don't fit in that box, then you are to be ostracized. You are to be made an example of. You are held up, I feel like, as a scare tactic, which is also, again, a cult tactic to make an example of anyone when they leave.
And I'm not going to say that applies to all members of the church, because it is so not black and white. I know there are really kind, wonderful, compassionate members of the church. And this is why my heart is aching right now, because I love these people and I want them to stay in my life, and I don't want to hurt them, which is why I've been going through this big challenge of these things. And so by applying empathy is my first step. The empathy that I had to learn outside of the church, where you get into the shoes of someone, you get into someone else's shoes, you feel with them, you feel for them. What would they be experiencing?
Right.
And I know what that's like, because I used to be in that position. When I was a member of the church and someone I knew and loved left the church, I was confused and I was hurt, because I took it personally.
Because the church has taught you to do that. That is programming.
If you're rejecting my beliefs, you're rejecting me.
Because you are the church and the church is you.
Exactly.
And I will say, just as an example, and I've brought this up before, where I confronted them with something about the church, about LGBTQ, and the church being about love, and this person, someone that I know, someone that I worked with, glitched out. And that is exactly what she said. In that moment of glitching out, she said, well, I love God, and God is the church, and God loves me, and the church loves me, and I am God. And she didn't say I'm God. She didn't say that. But it was so imbued with her that was just what she just started kind of garbling out to me. That's how entrenched it was. And that was her go-to sort of, in her instance, sort of glitch out space.
Right. So the way I'm addressing this is I'm having empathy for these members of the church, because I remember what it felt like, and I don't want to hurt anyone. It's not my intent here to come on and say, fuck all of these people because they believe this. It's really like, I see you, I understand where you're coming from, and I just want you to be happy and find joy, but I can't make you see things the way I see things, because we're all different, we're unique, we have different perspectives. And if the church genuinely brings you joy,
That's great.
then wonderful. You continue on that path. We're not here to strip you of joy. We're here to identify abuse and to show empathy for all types of people.
Right. And I love that about you. And I think that you are such a kind, empathetic, thoughtful, insightful, deep, wonderful person. And I am so grateful for my friendship with you, and to know somebody that like good of heart. You are one of a very small handful of people that I know that I can say are like just seriously, truly a heart of gold.
Oh,
and I love that. I love that about you. And I will say, I think of myself, I am an empathetic person, and I think that I'm mostly a good person. Sometimes I'm a shithead, but
As we all are.
I haven't seen you be that much of a shithead, really. Ever.
Oh,
I
just
haven't
wait.
seen-
Just you wait,
I'm
Erika.
sure we'll have some fun shithead times together, no doubt. But I've only seen you act with complete integrity and empathy and compassion, and I hope to have as many of those things. And I will say this, but this is one of the areas where we diverge a little bit, and we have a little bit of a difference of opinion, because for me, empathy runs out at a certain point. And I'll give you an example. if you grow up in an abusive household where your dad beats the shit out of you and tells you you're a fucking moron and a piece of shit and whatever else, the chances that you are going to grow up and not be an abusive asshole yourself are small. It's very, I mean, all the research is there. Maybe it's not small, but you are definitely have more of a likelihood to be an abuser if you grew up in an abusive household. Sure. And the same thing with any different kind of abuse. And I have all the empathy for that kid who grows up in that house, and I have empathy for that young adult. And then at some point, I feel like there is a level of responsibility. And it's not a one-to-one with people in the church for sure, but my empathy runs out when that kid is 45 and beating the shit out of their kid. Yeah, they had a fucked up childhood. Yeah, this was really difficult, but at some point, we do have to take responsibility for our actions. And when I see people trying to coerce people, back into the church, or when people are acting only in service and protection to the church, yes, they've been programmed that way, but at some point they are adults, and what they're doing is enabling and supporting financially and otherwise in an abusive organization. And I struggle with that empathy, and I love that you have that empathy. I think it's wonderful, and maybe I should have more of it. And I feel bad for those people that are entrenched in that. And at the same time, there is, to me, a little bit of a level of somehow, being able to take responsibility at some point and not supporting an abusive, traumatizing, manipulative organization. And that's where I struggle a little bit. But I love your point of view. And
I don't believe empathy is the answer to everything, because empathy by itself can lead to like submissiveness and a passive nature. You're a doormat. If you're all empathy, if you're all thinking about, oh, my abuser is doing this and that, and my poor abuser, Stockholm syndrome, right, comes from people who just look at their abuser with so much empathy. However, I also believe in boundaries. Yes. I believe boundaries are equally important to empathy. And so, having done some theater before, you've done theater as well, there's improv. The number one rule of improv is yes and. Yeah. And I love the yes and principle. Yes. And good for you. So the number one rule in improv is yes and I like to apply that to empathy as the yes and boundaries as the and. So I can have empathy, hold space for people, even people who are abusive, and say, yes, I understand something really awful happened to you. I understand that you have some deep wounds that still need to be healed. You need to learn, you need to grow from these things. Yes, I validate that. And the behavior is not okay. So I have a story from when my kid, Theo, was like 9 or 10. And we were about to go to the aquarium. It was summertime, and I noticed that their bangs were a little long. And I said, oh, hey, come here, we're gonna snip those up. And so I started clipping the bangs, and I'm terrible. If you see me coming with scissors, run.
As I usually do when someone's coming at me with scissors. No problem.
One should. But I'm terrible at cutting hair. And so as I was trying to trim up these bangs, they went from here to here. And then finally they were at like almost Dumb and Dumber level. And my poor kid, like 10 at the time, lost their mind. Yeah. Freaked out and said, Mom, what are you doing? I look like an idiot. How could you do this to me? Just lost their mind, screamed at me. Because they were hurt and they were embarrassed, right? And so I remember at the time, I was reading a lot of Brené Brown. At the
love
moment,
her.
I
She's
love
so
her
great.
too. And I was, instead of thinking, what would Jesus do? I thought, what would Brené Brown do?
What would she do?
I went through all of these options I had in my head at the time. So the first one was, I could be a complete authoritarian monster and say, how dare you talk to your mother that way? Go to your room, you're grounded. I could have done that. I could have said, come on, it's your fault. You were the one who was moving around, and just gaslit my kid into thinking it was their fault when it was mine. Mm-hmm. I could have gone the complete polar opposite and been like, oh, my poor baby, oh, honey, I'm so sorry, let me go buy you an ice cream. What can I do? And just trying to make it better, which sounds like the right thing to do. However, what it would have been doing is rewarding the bad behavior, When my child yells and screams at me, I reward them, and then they say it's okay.
You set a pathway,
Exactly.
for how to get reward in the future.
Pavlovian dogs, exactly. So the answer with what would Brene Brown do was, well, Brene would have empathy and boundaries.
And responsibility, probably.
Well, and I'll get to that. So at the time, I started with the empathy, the yes. Yes, honey, I am so sorry. That is awful. Like, I know this is embarrassing for you. I should not have done that. It's completely my fault. I am so sorry. And when you're in a better space, maybe we can do some problem solving, but I know right now is not the time. And I need you to know it's not okay for you to talk to your mom that way. For you to yell at me like that. That was not okay. So I would like for you to calm down and apologize when you're ready. And then and only then we can go to the aquarium, but we can't go before then.
How'd they respond?
So it took every ounce of strength I had in me to just leave the situation. And I went downstairs, started doing other things, and my kid was upstairs just fuming until about 15 minutes later, they came downstairs and said, Mom, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have yelled at you like that.
Oh.
And I said, thank you for your apology. And you know what? I'm not going to cut your hair again. Would you like a hat? Would that help? And they're like, nah, it's summertime. No one's going to see me, so it's fine. I said, cool, let's go to the aquarium. Let's go. And I bought them ice cream, of course. but inside,
But it was after, not as a gut reaction to...
At the moment, though, like fireworks were going off in my head. I'm like, this is how I parent. It's yes and.
Yeah.
Like, you have to validate a person's experience because everyone needs validation. Everyone, even the abusers, even those awful people, they need validation.
You're right.
And boundaries.
Yeah.
They need someone to say, you know what, this behavior's not okay.
And can I say, and you did that, and you do that, and I see you do it over and over in your TikTok, Midlife ExMo. It's fantastic. You do a really good job when people are pretty shitty to you and nasty and insulting, and I'm always sort of in awe of that. And I try, but then a lot of times I fail. And I will say, and I hope this is okay, but I think also that was a little bit what was jarring in this instance, because the empathy was definitely there. I feel like I saw the boundaries crumble just a little bit as they punched through, and they were saying, this is making us uncomfortable. We don't want you to do this. And you were like, maybe I shouldn't do this.
With my friends.
Yeah, and I had never seen you do that before. You're always, yes, and you did that eventually. You did, and when whatever's right for you is great. But from my perspective, I hadn't ever seen that from you before. I always saw you go, yes, and with all the haters and the people who come out of the woodwork, and you have a lot of lovers, that's not the right word, but
supporters, friends.
Supporters. I was like, what's the opposite of haters? Lovers. No, that's not right. You have a lot of people who support you, and I would say many, many, many more than that. But with the people who are haters, you are always able to put up the boundaries. And I saw that crumble just for a minute and of course, they're your close friends and people who mean a great deal to you that you don't want to lose. So I understand that was traumatic. But that was a different, just sort of interaction that I was seeing, a different path just for a moment, a reaction.
Well, I think I was able to apply it through my whole journey. As I started, when I first left the church, I think I mentioned this in another episode, but when I first left the church and everything was falling around, like I was getting a divorce, I had to find a new place to live and a new job, and I had left the church and was unpacking that. And on my 45th birthday, my birthday gift to myself was to be authentic. And so I made a big, long-ass Facebook post saying, dear world, this is what's going on in my life on my 45th birthday. I am in midlife, and this is what's going on. I'm not getting divorced. I had mentioned all of these things. And I said, when I said about the part of the church, I said, I know this is going to be hurtful for some of you. I know because I've been there. I'm leaving the church, and I'm not coming back. If you're interested in knowing why I left the church, I'm happy to share with you, but I'm not going to be preaching that from the rooftop. So if you're interested, reach out to me and then we can have a conversation. I was surprised by how much incredible support I got from those people. I had people crawling out of the woodwork, not just people who had also left the church, but I had people I knew were stalwart members reach out to me. Hey, Kate, I'm really interested in hearing your story. Would you be willing to share that with me? Because I started with the empathy. Yesterday, I made a similar Facebook post as I'm talking about this podcast, which I know is going to be really jarring for a lot of people that I love and care about. And I started the same thing. And I said, I know this is going to hurt a lot of you. That's my empathy. I know this is hard. I believe in being authentically me. This is something I feel I want to do. And if it's not okay, if this is hurtful for you, let's have some boundaries. Don't follow me on social media. And if you need to take a break from me, or if you need to unfollow me for a while because this is too much for you, do that. Because boundaries are just as important as empathy in any healthy relationship.
Absolutely. And I loved that post, and I commented on that as well.
Thank you.
And I think you had a lot of support on that.
A lot
also.
of support.
I didn't see any negative comments. Nope. It was only goodness. So I think that's wonderful, and that's one of the reasons I love being your friend. I try to strive to be a little bit more like you. I'm a little bit more, maybe reactionary.
Well, the thing I love about you, Erika, is that you encourage that part of authenticity and give a space for all of the feelings. Like, because I think I have been programmed to, like, let's all be kumbaya and peace and happiness and keep sweet.
And I'm like, fuck kumbaya! Yeah. Just joking, I'm not. I like kumbaya too.
But I love that you give me a space to get out my feelings, and you're incredibly validating and empathic. And when I say, like, you know what, I'm not ready to talk about this, you're like, okay, cool, let's change gears, let's change directions to what we want to talk about, because you're looking at how I feel. So I don't believe you're void of empathy, my goodness.
No, I'm not saying that. I have empathy. I'm just saying your empathy goes to here and my empathy goes to here. I run out of empathy at a certain point, at certain times. And I want to go to something that we had talked about a while ago, and this is kind of an example of this. You told me about on your TikTok, you do a live TikTok, and you have people come on, and one day, do you want to tell us? And then I can say my reaction to it, because you're the one with the TikTok.
Yeah, so I've been doing TikTok lives for a while, where I would invite people to come, and I would put up I'm an ex-Mormon and an ex-Christian, ask me anything, as people have a tendency to do, and I got a good number of people who would come back regularly. A lot of the times it was just an echo chamber for ex-Mormons like me, where we just want to vent and we just want to have some validation. We want to talk about things that were frustrating to us, and that always feels good to have people who think the same as you. However, I would have people who were active believing members of the church or Christians that would come on and would start talking on these lives, and a lot of my ex-Mormon content creator friends were here and they were having none of it.
And these people were being respectful. The current Mormons were mostly respectful, right?
Yeah, not all of them. I mean, again, it's not black and white. But I was having a conversation with someone who is still very deep in the church, wasn't really trying to proselytize, and I think we were having a very civil conversation. But the ex-Mormons in my chat were like, get rid of him. Let's get this guy out of here. We don't want him here. And I was like, whoa. The rules for my chat are, let's be respectful of other people's opinions. Let's not shame one another. Let's just provide a space where we can have these civil conversations. Once this active Christian left the chat, then all of these ex-Mormon friends came on and were saying, we shouldn't allow people like that on our chats. This is one thing and another, and here's why. I felt triggered by what this person had to say. It was not safe. It was not okay. I even had to tell people in my chat, like, whoa, we don't laugh at other people's beliefs. We don't laugh at their feelings when they're sharing them and they're here and they're present with us. I mean, you and I can laugh about things all the time as long as we know our audience, correct?
Yeah. And we're not laughing at somebody. We're laughing
at the beliefs,
near
right?
Somebody. No, just joking. Not laughing at beliefs, just laughing at sort of some things that
which come from the church, not from the people.
Yes, exactly.
They come from the church, the organization, not the people. Anyway, back to the story with the people on the live. After I ended this, I was just so torn, because you want to be accepted by the popular kids, you want to be part of the group. But I felt like I was disappointing them by not playing by their rules. And I wanted to say, hey, you're right, guys, come on back, we'll play. I had spent so much of my life trying to conform. And now for the first time in my life, I'm learning what authenticity is. I had to speak up to these friends of mine and say, you know what? If this is not okay for you, I invite you to not join my lives, because I am going to continue to invite people. As long as they follow the rules of my chat, they are welcome to share whatever their beliefs are, and we're not going to laugh at them. We're not going to shame them or insult them, because their feelings and their beliefs are just as valid as yours are.
And that is you doing you, and it's beautiful, and I love that. And you told me that story. This is when we were just, in the infancy of our podcast, and we were getting together and just talking about different subjects that we wanted to talk about. And I clocked this moment, because you told me about this, and you said, I don't know, did I do the right thing? And obviously I can't answer whether or not you did the right thing. And I sat for a second and I said, you know what? I think I love what you did. I love it, and I think it is a beautiful, wonderful choice. And it's so you, and holding space for all different points of view and perspectives. And there should absolutely be more of that. And that's so great. And I understand their point of view too. And I don't think there is a right or wrong choice. I understand why you did what you did, and I think that's a great choice to have people, all of the different perspectives in the room. I also understand why a group of people who are saying, hey, this fucking organization took our money, they stole from us, they stole our self-worth, our self-confidence, our ability to think critically, our ability to make choices about our lives. And we can never get that back. And that has caused trauma that we will be unpacking for the rest of our lives. Yeah. I don't want to be in a room with someone who upholds the organization. So I understand both points of view, and it's really interesting to me, because I do think we are in a very divisive time in our country, in our history, and we don't want to listen to each other. And it's probably best that we do. On the other hand, I can say, like, there are certain people I don't want to hear the point of view of a Nazi. I don't care. And they're not Nazis. I'm not saying anyone in the LDS Church is a Nazi. I'm just at all. I'm not making the comparison there. I'm just saying there are some points of view sometimes people don't want to hear, or people perceive as not being valid. There are people think that should not have voices. And for your friends, that those people are the damaging ones for them, people who still support and uphold this church and will go to bat for them and protect them at all costs. And the reason that's probably triggering is because they grew up in a household where if their parents had to decide whether or not their children ate or they tithed, they were told by this organization, no, you tithe to the church. You don't feed your kids. That's traumatic. And then to be in a room with people who still support that, yikes, like I can see how that would be hard.
I can see both perspectives too, which is why I feel like it's important that everyone determines what their boundaries are for themselves. Yeah. It's not my job to dictate what your boundaries are, just as your job is not to dictate what
so they can leave.
Are.
So they can leave your
and trigger
life.
Warnings are helpful, and I would continue to encourage people who do want to have their faith promoted to not listen to our podcast.
Right, exactly.
I don't want you to listen because I'm being authentically me. You're being authentically you.
I drop a lot of F-bombs. You don't like it? Definitely don't fucking listen to this podcast.
That's your decision that you make for yourself. It's not a decision we make for you.
Yeah, and I like that. I think when people are able to act in that way and to allow everyone to have their boundaries and they have their boundaries, then things function well. We're just in a space maybe where that isn't always the case. Everything that we're doing, everything that we're talking about, anything, whenever we are criticizing or shining a light on, what we're looking at is the church leadership, because they know that what they're teaching is a lie.
They know that it's harmful.
They know that it's harmful. They don't care because all that really matters at the end of the day is that 10% and probably some amount of power.
Oh, the power that comes with it as well.
And so Kate, we both have empathy for members. Kate probably has more empathy, whereas I have some frustration sometimes, and also a lot of empathy. But when we're talking about all of this, as all of this is coming up, and we discuss all these different topics, we're really looking at church leadership.
Yeah.
Church leadership. We're not condemning members of the church or making fun of them or looking down on them.
And we will hold them accountable when they cause harm. So when the church causes harm, we can say, yeah, I understand that you want money and power. I understand that you were raised to believe that this is important. I get that. I'm validating you and your experience, and it's not okay.
It's not okay. And especially
you are exploiting members. You are damaging people. That's not okay. And I do the same with members of the church who come onto my social media and attack me. I can say, yes, I understand this is what you believe. I understand this is where you are in your life. And your behavior is not okay. As long as we focus on the behavior, I don't believe in shaming anyone, because shame never allows someone to develop and progress. When we shame someone, a couple of things happen. Either it's a, fuck you, I mean, you know what you're talking about, I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want. Or, even worse, is they begin to believe it.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, you're right, I am this awful, horrible person, and I'm incapable of changing. So shame never works.
Yeah.
Guilt does. The difference, and Brene Brown, who I love and respect, says the difference between guilt and shame is guilt says I did something bad. Shame says I am something bad.
Right, absolutely.
And for me, it's important to separate the person from their behavior.
Absolutely, and I 100% agree. I will also say there is some level of, well, you said, you hold people accountable when they when they are harmful in service to the church. And I do think in a lot of instances, and again, this is where we diverge a little bit, my empathy does run out at that point where people are doing harm in service of the church. And I'll just give one example. It starts really young. It starts with children, and not everyone behaves this way. But in my neighborhood, talking about shame, we had a neighbor, and their little girls were playing outside. I think they were between the ages of 7 and 9, and they had tank tops on. We live in Utah. It is hot here in the summer. It gets up to 106, 110. So these little girls were playing, and they had their tank tops on. And just playing kickball or whatever out in the park in front of our house. And one of the other little girls that they were playing with, who was a member of the church, ran up to them and said, "You are not properly modest. You need to cover up your shoulders. That's improper, and you need to cover up." These are 9, 7, 8, 9-year-old girls. She shamed her, and she learned that. That was a learned behavior.
Absolutely.
No one said that to me growing up. That is something that's learned. Mm-hmm. That is something that the church put on her. And it is, again, one of those control tactics. Part of the BITE model is you control behavior, language, everything, belief system. And that was a part of that. And that little girl has already learned when someone steps out of line, when they're not in line with what the church teaches, you shame them, you make them feel bad, and you pull them back in. And that's where I struggle with the empathy in those cases. I feel bad for that little kid. She's a little kid. She has not had, their brain is not anywhere near developed. I think there's probably a strong likelihood that she will grow up and do some of the things that the people do to you. And my empathy, God, I love you, Kate. You're so great with the empathy, but man, I run out. I'm not as good of a person as you.
You are.
No, I'm not.
Person.
I'm not. It's okay. It's okay. And I love that you can do that. I just struggle. And I think it's interesting, like the difference between us. I wish I could be more like you.
Well, it's my job to convert you to believe in my religion. So
I'm not tithing you 10%. I actually don't have an income right now, so you'd be screwed anyway.
One of the reasons that I feel like a lot of these members of the church are having a hard time with me speaking out against the church, and a lot of other ex-Mormon content creators who I follow and admire, is that we're leaning into our authenticity. We're saying this is who we are. This is who we're learning who we are. And I don't think we're ever going to just become something and stay that way forever. We're learning, we're growing, we're evolving, but we are living into our current authenticity. And members of the church have a hard time with that because they're told not to. The scriptures, there's a scripture in the Book of Mormon that teaches that the natural man is an enemy to God, which essentially means everything that makes you you is bad.
And I want to just unpack that for one quick second. God made all the people, because that's what the belief is, made them all to be its enemy, made them all wrong, all fucked up, made them intentionally to be an enemy to itself so it can punish them and condemn them.
Yeah. Doesn't sound like a very loving God, does it?
No, it sounds like a totally fucked up sociopath God. That sounds insane to me.
Yeah.
Is that part of the Bible, or is that the Book of Mormon?
It was the Book of Mormon.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, I don't remember hearing that as an Episcopalian, but they definitely cut pieces of that of the Bible out.
Yeah, and so it's just, I think the leaders of the church really discourage authenticity. They're afraid of it. And they want to promise that this happiness is only attainable by subscribing to their model of happiness, and it's not okay. So that's where I will say to members of the church, if you thoroughly believe in this church, it brings you joy, it brings you happiness, I'm still very happy for you. Yes, I get where you're coming from. And I want to hold the church accountable for the harm that it does to people like me, to people like my ex-Mormon friends, to the little girls in tank tops, to all of those people who feel like they're never going to be enough. And that's why we're here.
Yeah, and I think that is really important, and I'm so happy to hear like your point of view, your story, your journey, and I love how tenaciously you latch onto the idea of empathy and boundaries. I think if we could all lead that way, the world would be a better place.
I used to teach at a school where we did the Leader in Me program, which was Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Stephen Covey was a member of the church, by the way. And in this book, habit number 5 was seek first to understand, then to be understood. And that's where empathy lives.
Yeah.
And I would tell my kids every school year, my favorite habit is habit number 5, because I believe with all my heart that if every one of us were to seek to understand one another, then to be understood, most of the problems of the world would evaporate.
Yeah.
Because we would be thinking about others and holding boundaries for ourselves. And I think problems can be solved just by applying that principle.
Yeah. Well, you know what just occurred to me? Maybe you're the second coming.
I'm the second. I should talk to Ben.
Maybe you are Jesus Christ. You're back, baby. Well,
that was blasphemy, Erika. Knock it off.
Right, Jesus could never have a vagina. Anyway, let's do our little toast.
Yes.
But in summary, empathy, boundaries, authenticity. The more you know.
Let's do it together.
Ready? The more you know.
Beautiful. All right, until next time, this is Kate.
This is Erika. Cheers to deconstructing Mormonism.